Survey says, in a recent poll, 40% of Californians are thinking about leaving the state. 60%, we'll stay. It's all good. I mean, the taxes are mostly low. I mean, state seems to have all of its politics worked out. There's no homeless issue. There's no crime issue. I mean, things are good. 40% of them said, yeah, we're thinking about leaving. How seriously? Very. Let's get into it. Here we go. Today, the LA Times published the results of a poll taken earlier this month in California. The poll found that most people who live there are happy about it, but at the same time, fully 40% were thinking about leaving. 40%. That's a big chunk. Not 10%, not 15%. A massive number. About 70% of residents said they are happy living here, a new statewide poll shows, crediting the state's diversity, economic opportunities, and an enjoyable lifestyle as reasons to stick around. Diversity? Yes. All right. California's got that going on. So do a lot of other states. Economic opportunities. Wow, it's a massive workplace. So just, ton of different industry. California's big too, right? I mean, it's geographically big. From Northern California to Southern California, there's a lot of change. And you got San Fran down to San Diego. I mean, just a lot of stuff going on. An enjoyable lifestyle. Some areas, yeah, for sure. Other areas, not as much so, and people are leaving. Yet large swaths of residents are also considering packing up and leaving. Many also believe that the state is headed in the wrong direction and are anxious about the direction of the economy and their ability to pay their bills. One of the major reasons it's just gotten so expensive, and the tax liability in California. Why would you stay there if you can go work elsewhere, not have to pay those taxes, not have to pay the super high cost of living? Those are things that I think people are always kind of trying to figure out which one is the big priority for me. More than 40% of residents say that they're contemplating moving out of California, with nearly half of them saying that they're considering that very seriously. So let's say 20%, 1 out of 5 people from this poll are saying, yeah, we're really thinking about leaving. About 61% pointed to the high cost of living here as the reason they'd go. People of color are far more likely to say that the expense of living in California is the reason they might leave. About 71% of residents who are either Black or Asian Pacific Islander and considering relocating cited the cost of living. It's expensive, but everybody knows that. I've had friends move there recently and they're like, yeah, this is what we want to do after like a year. And they've lived here. After like a year, they're like, yeah, we're thinking about coming back. It's very diverse and it's got a lot of economic opportunity. However, it's really expensive. And you've also got quality of life issues, depending on what city you're in, that, you're not going to find everywhere else. And so, there's an out-migration from California going on right now. There's an out-migration, period. Nearly 30% of those surveyed said that they might leave because the state's policies and laws don't align with their own political views, a reflection of the polarization of the state and the nation at the moment. Respondents who identified as conservative were much more likely to cite the politics of the state as the reason why they were considering moving. Makes absolute sense, right? Are there any? There's lots of conservatives in California. You guys reach out to me all the time. Like, yeah, it wasn't this way when I moved here 25 years ago. It's gotten way worse. Way worse. That's what everybody always complains about, right? And yet, unless you make a change, you're just it's like me living here in Seattle. Am I okay with it? No. Am I going to move away? No. It's just kind of what we're doing, right? You got some just crazy stuff going on, but not every part of California is, has this massive upside down influence. Leadership? Yeah. It's like my state here, in Washington. I mean, we rarely ever have a Republican do anything of note because people here are just, they're all woke and They're just also concerned about nonsense that doesn't really matter, right? So no surprise that conservatives are more likely to say state policies are a reason to leave. It's effectively a one-party state at this point, California, with no end in sight. That's how Washington state feels. Oregon, same thing. I mean, every now and then you've got somebody who runs a race and yeah, they got kind of close, but for the most part, no. I mean, it's just population in the big cities here in the West Coast. They do not vote Republican, right? So in addition to financial incentives to leave, conservatives have political incentives to do so as well. The Times, LA Times, seems to be working hard to portray California's progressive values as a main selling point for the state, but they admit midway through the article that not everything in the poll jibes with that. Oh, what's up with that? Asked whether the country has overcorrected and gone too far in its attempts to give everyone equal rights, nearly half said yes, 100%. This whole, trying to make everybody feel warm and fuzzy, giving everybody a participation ribbon for just living, it's absolute nonsense. It's just insanity. And trying to make everything equal for everybody. You're never going to do that. You're never going to do that. And when you have all of this focus on trying to keep it all equal on a level playing field, there's people hustling and making things happen, and they are succeeding. They are succeeding in life. And the other people all worked up about, oh, he did that over there. Oh, they're doing that. Oh, this entity over there, they're doing that. Oh, when they're worried about what other people are doing, other guys over here are doing it. They're making things happen. So, you can bitch all you want. You can complain all you want. And that's what my state does a lot of. You can do that all day long, but somebody out there is getting ahead. Yeah. It's the people hustling, right? And making it happen. People who have money and that are going to continue to make money. And you got to work hard. If you don't have any, you got to work hard. That's the thing I think a lot of folks don't want to deal with, is that you're going to have to grind. If you really want to get ahead of whatever it is you're doing. There's no easy, well, I just took this little course and everything just fell in line and I'm all good to go. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Doesn't matter what kind of investment you're doing. Doesn't matter what you're doing. You're going to have to figure out a way to make it go. And you might have to put some time in to have that happen. The exact breakdown on this equation, on this question, was 47 to 46 overall. This is if the country is overcorrected and gone too far. Have we gotten too woke? Yeah, absolutely. We had Pride here this past. This has nothing really to do with Pride, but it kind of does. We had Pride weekend here in Seattle, big Pride thing. 300,000 people showed up. And I had some naked bicyclists. Naked bicyclists and kids in the parade. Naked bicyclists. You can imagine how that went. I mean, it's just like, all right, it's a little bit of an overcorrection. We don't need that much. Since when is it okay to have, fully nude male adults just prancing around in a parade? And then you have a bunch of kids coming right up behind them. Hey, look at that guy. Doesn't have any clothes on. What are we doing here? I don't know. Why do we have naked dudes running around with kids in a parade? That's just what we're doing. Yeah, overcorrection? Yes, I believe so, in my opinion. And I don't even have little kids. My oldest is 30. 53 to 42 among whites. We're talking about overcorrection. 44 to 48 among Latinos. Latinos, okay, yeah. 29 to 63 among African Americans and 48 to 46 among Asians. So a lot of these basically saying, we're kind of 50-50. Half of us think that, yeah, we've overcorrected. The other half haven't. Okay. All right. And if you weren't, answering this poll and you're out doing something constructive, people might say, hey, there's cause and effect. You work hard, you got a plan, you'll get there. You don't work hard, you kind of wait for the government to give you something. Good luck with that. There was also another interesting outcome in this poll, which the LA Times didn't mention. And this is one of the reasons I'm reading this article. Respondents were asked how they believed people of specific races were discriminated against in California. When asked about African Americans, the overall result was 76% believed that they had been discriminated against, whether it's frequently or sometimes, to 21, rarely or never. So 76 to 21 said they had been discriminated against. Black respondents in particular answered this question 88 to 8, an overwhelming belief that their fellow Black Californians were victims. But when the same group was asked how they had experienced racial discrimination, the answer was 59 to 39. So 59 of them had said, no, we haven't. And 39% had said, yeah. So, I mean, not inverse, but pretty close. So it's that perception of, oh, it's happening over there. I know it's happening there. Versus, well, I mean, not to me personally, but, those guys over there, they're getting discriminated against. That for sure they are being discriminated against. All right. But me, this is what the poll is saying, right? The same was true for other racial groups. For instance, Latinos said that they believed California Latinos experienced discrimination. All right. 75% of them, frequently or sometimes, they had been discriminated against. They're asking, do you think Latinos in general have been discriminated against? So 75, yes. 24, rarely or never said that. So yeah, overwhelming majority said yeah. Yet when asked if they had personally experienced racial discrimination, the response was 34 to 63. Almost the inverse relationship again, right? I mean, 34 said, not me. I mean, not to me personally, but those guys over there, they have been. Okay. So, and this pattern continues. It's pretty wild. Among Asians, the said discrimination against Asians in California happened 75 to 22. 75%? Yep. 22? No, never. But asked what discrimination they personally experienced, the answer was 35 to 65. Not me, but again, almost identical, right? Almost identical to the last group. In other words, the number of people who say they've been personally experienced discrimination is significantly lower than what people think is happening. That's interesting. It's not just a few points. For Latinos, the gap was 41 points. For Asians, it was 40 points. For Black Californians, it was 29 points. For whites, the difference is only about 9 points. So either this poll happened to contact a group of people who've somehow been uniquely passed over by discrimination, or maybe everyone's perception of how the discrimination is actually happening is way off. Huh. Could that be? I mean, it's just a poll, right? And you've got an error factor in there. An error factor of 3.45 plus or minus to each side. We've got to be fair here. We could have been off just a little bit, but those numbers on that whole discrimination thing are super interesting, aren't they? Because I think we've had this beaten into our heads that there's all this discrimination going on out there. And yet when you ask people, honestly, is it happening to you? Oh, it's not. It's not happening to you. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what kind of plus or minus do we have there? With the results here, it's hard to say, hey, everybody's being discriminated against, right? Because the numbers just don't match up. It's not there. Getting back to our 40% of Californians are thinking about leaving like soon. I think that's your faction of people that are middle of the road. They're more moderate. They're not digging what they're seeing. And yet they want to complain about it. They want to think about it. They want to reimagine it. But odds are they probably won't make a move. 40% of Californians won't make, of the people in this poll said, hey, going to be moving out soon, or I'm really thinking about it. Maybe they're thinking about it, but they're not going to do it. Because you always see these polls that are set to incite, right? And that's one of the reasons a number of you guys sent this to me. And I'm like, yeah, I'll read it. We'll talk about this. So the discrimination part of this poll had probably more validity to me than the actual number of, all right, this group of people says that they're moving. Now, some of the data that we have seen is that folks are moving out of California, but a lot of that is job related as well. Yep. California's got the economic diversity, But you've also got a bunch of jobs going into Texas, a bunch of companies that have left California going into Texas, jobs and people going to Florida. The pandemic really put a spotlight on this. Remember when we had like Hollywood movie sets where we're all a go, and then restaurants across the street would be locked down and just nothing happening. Hollywood sets would have all this food and catered, food and whatnot, and people barely wearing masks. And then a restaurant literally right there in the parking lot wasn't open. So I think during the pandemic, a lot of the ridiculousness, a lot of the things that people find to be negative about California was brought to the surface. All right. So if I'm going to be hunkered down at home, none of my favorite spots are open. I got a shelter in place, whatever that means. My company is closed down, whatever. I think people kind of really looked at that and went, I remember at the very beginning, when Joe Rogan took off, Ben Shapiro took off. I mean, a whole bunch of, kind of thought leaders. It's funny when you put Joe Rogan in as thought leader, but he's got the biggest podcast out there. And so, even just recently, somebody's like, Joe Rogan saying bad things about Spotify should cancel him because it was on the vaccination. He was having an argument and wanted somebody to debate another individual. You guys know that one. And the one that was on the end of science, they weren't wanting to debate. So you had a whole bunch of thought leaders and a whole bunch of people in entertainment. And I think Joe Rogan left California because money. He knew he was going to be signing this massive deal, $200 million with Spotify. You want to get taxed on that in your home state as well, in addition to, or you can move on down the road. You take your whole crew with you. Everybody moves with you. You buy a massive compound in Austin and you go do your thing down there. And if you're going to be taking 200 million, you know what I mean? You can make a lot of things happen. But at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw so many people leaving because it was kind of this culmination of, you had a whole bunch of crime. And that has not stopped. And then when you're told, hey, you can't use all the cool things that you're used to in your life, and businesses basically said, okay, all the taxes that are going on here, all of this stuff, not only just income tax, but the, regulation on businesses, it just, they make it virtually impossible to get a business going and keep it going and long-term make a profit. I mean, those are all complaints that come out all of the time. And then on top of that, you've got cities that defunded their police and you don't have enough cops and makes it even harder for small business to stay in business doing what they're doing. But all of these things kind of came to a head at the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember doing a handful of podcasts about that time thinking, this is some really weird stuff. I mean, I get it why people are moving. But I think I felt like it was probably a trend that is an ongoing longer term trend because California's had its run, right? It used to be great weather, great place to run a business way back in the day. It was the American dream. It was the epitome of the American dream. And then, all these policies put in place that restrict everything. They have the opposite effect. And now people are like, no, get me out of here. I want to go. 40% saying, yeah, I would like to move out of here. I would quickly like to do that. We're not saying any one given city either, right? We're not saying any one given city. I was reading an article about how you can run a line up the middle of, I think it was Coachella Valley. It was Indio. It was a handful of cities. You can run a line right up through those cities and off to the left, off to the west. You've got just, one way of thinking and off to the right. Yeah, you're in Eastern California and you're in Northeastern California and things are a little bit different there, right? Just that different mentality. And so a lot of it has to do with geography and where you sit. It's like me being here in Seattle. We've got crazy nonsense going on in Seattle, but just a few miles away here in Bellevue, things are pretty boring. We just don't have a lot of drama like that. It's just not what we're doing. And yet I get lumped into the whole, well, you need to get out of Washington State as soon as you can because it's just going to hell in a handbucket. It's like, okay, yeah, but in my little territory over here, it's not that bad. And yeah, we make a lot of fun of Seattle. We make a lot of fun of San Francisco. We make a lot of fun of Portland because there's a lot of stuff going on that makes absolutely no sense. So what percentage of this 40% will actually move, will actually up and move? 5% of that 40? 3? Because you're talking about how about if 3% of Californians booked it out and moved? Population wise, that would be massive. Way more than we've seen in recent years. Massive. So that's where you've got this whole poll thing. All right. So what are you thinking? Okay. Here's what I'm thinking versus what are you actually going to do? And I think a lot of people in their minds think that they want to move out of a state and they want to move somewhere else to have more freedom. Yeah. But in reality, will they do it? Let's be reasonable. Probably not. Because they got family, they got, a whole life vested wherever. Is that really going to move them? I don't know. We, during the pandemic here at Summit Properties Northwest, we helped a lot of people move out of Washington State and get their money out of Washington State. And they told us specifically, hey, the reason we're leaving is because we think you're going to have a state income tax or some form of it coming up soon. It's gotten way too expensive. And people come here to Washington State because it's less expensive than California. We've had the in-migration to Washington State from California. It started in the early 80s before the whole Microsoft thing really took off. We've always had people coming here because it's so much cheaper than what they're experiencing down there. And now that our cost of housing has just gone through the roof, I mean, it's mind blowing what $1.5 million gets you now here in Seattle. It is not that much. And if you come over to the burbs, it's even less. It's like, oh, that looks like a starter home. It is. That'll be $1.25 million for you. Hey, it's got a second bathroom and it's got a 2-car garage. You're all golden. Where do I sign for that? Right? No, things have gotten expensive. They've gotten expensive. And it's one of those things where people go, okay, yeah, cost. And I think there's a lot of folks that have ideology in their mind as well. They're like, this isn't what I came here for. This isn't what I signed up for, but it's what you're getting. And then you've also got the whole thing of, well, this is the way people vote, just like in Chicago. I mean, people complain about the violence and the gun violence specifically in Chicago. And yet who did they vote in as mayor? Yeah. You got the options of, guy that's progressive and he's going down all these other roads, nothing to do with public safety. And he's like, yeah, we know we can't police our way out of this. And I'm in it for the long haul, meaning he's not going to do much to shore up public safety in the short term. That's the current mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Let's go, Brandon. So you've got people voting this stuff in, these people in, these policies in, these politicians in that create these policies. So it's like, okay, yeah, you can't really get too upset if you're one of the 40% saying you're going to leave because you keep voting this stuff in. It's not some magic thing happening. Somebody's voting, right? So, at the end of the day, in these ultra liberal states and cities, somebody's making all this happen. So you can't blame it on the weather. How about the lawsuit down in Multnomah County? They're going to sue just a whole bunch of big oil companies because of the weather anomaly that happened in 2021, 2 years ago, where we had a heat dome. Got this heat dome. We're going to blame big oil. But hey, during the middle of winter, when I want to turn on my furnace, yeah, not whether it's natural gas or whatever. Yeah, we're going to ignore the whole and get in my car, which isn't electric because only so many people can actually afford an electric car. I like to drive to work. And that's good. I mean, and it requires, some of that product from big oil. Never mind that. Never mind how many products come out of petroleum that we need to operate as a society. Let's blame those guys who brought it to us. Some just crazy stuff. But that's what you've got. You got a bunch of crazy people voting, the way that they want to vote. And then you've got people saying, well, because there's a certain percentage of that 40% that voted for a lot of these policies that they don't like. I mean, just the numbers don't lie, right? So everybody wants to take a dump on California. All right. Okay. But they're getting what they paid for. They're getting what they paid for. Chicago getting what it's paid for. Multnomah County. I mean, just the craziness going on in Portland. Multnomah County is the one that's suing the big oil companies over the heat dome. I mean, talk about an inordinate waste of a lawsuit. But somebody voted these folks in that think that it's a good idea, right? And so somebody's doing something that the stats aren't catching. That is what I'm saying. That is bottom line here, right? People have this idea of, you got to get out now. You got to go. And people maybe are thinking about it. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. And that's always the implication, right? 40% are going to move. Oh, what happened if 40% of California's, population left? What would happen? Well, it would be an absolute unmitigated disaster train wreck. I mean, it would just be the collapse of California. 40% of its citizens just up and booked it out. I mean, where would they go to? Are they going to spread out all across the United States? Oh, maybe. They're probably going to, who knows where they're going to go to. They don't know where they're going to go to. Because you know why? Because they're not going anywhere. They're just going to sit there and bitch and probably still vote the same way and go, we really don't like that guy over there. He's too reasonable. We're just going to keep going with this guy. Just like in Chicago. Yep. We know that gun violence is off the hook, but we're just, we like this progressive guy. He's got progress on his end of things happening. This is after Mayor Lori Lightfoot just absolutely dropped the ball and was a terrible mayor. So you've got lots of evidence of, policy and decisions being made that don't make any sense. And yet people say, well, it's not really no, it is your fault. You voted that way, even though you're thinking that you might want to move. So, end of the day, what percentage actually moves? Tiny little fraction. People just want to bitch about it. They just want to complain. And I get that, but make your complaint, felt in the form of a vote. Otherwise, expect much of the same. All right. That's it for me on this one. And we've got merch. We've got reasonable merch. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. Check out the link in the description below. Also, if you want to send me a story, go to Reasonable Plus on Discord. If you're not a Discord member, hey, it's free. Get on there. Send me messages. I look there for content all the time. And also we've got our reasonabletv.com. That's our private channel. That's where I talk about drugs. I talk about gun violence. I talk about stuff that I can't talk elsewhere because it gets censored. All right. Check us out. reasonabletv.com. Thanks so much. We'll catch up soon. Bye for now.